Welcome to the Are You Being Real show. I am sitting with the one and only Christopher Girbes-Pierce. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we've known each other for 5 years now, and I always had the utmost respect for you. And I saw you at Alex Benayan's book release party last week, and we got into a conversation, and you were talking to me about the importance of being real about our relationship to money. And I've had the show now for 3.5 years and haven't dedicated a single episode specifically to the psychology of money and our relationship to money. So I was thrilled when we decided to record this podcast conversation, and I'm just excited to personally learn from you. So wanted to really lob the baton over to you and to open it up with a story. Perhaps it's a story that dates back to your relationship with money, but I think it's obviously money is such a big piece of life. We all have our relationship with it. Some people it's a love-hate relationship. Some people it's a love relationship. Some people hate it or are scared of it. So I'm just going to pass the baton over to you.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to add, and some people don't know what their relationship to it is. Yeah, great introduction. It's funny. I think that people's relationship to money, it starts so early on. And I can say that because I've experienced that, and I've spent a lot of time, intentional thinking about what influenced the way I think about money. I've done that thinking, one, because it now is the business that I'm in, financial advising and whatnot, but also I'm married, and that has, caused me to really look back and explore and figure out my relationship to money, because that's really important, especially when you're combining two different relationships together. So I've thought a lot about this, and I've also worked with, I guess I can say now, crazy to think, but hundreds or maybe even thousands of clients, and gotten their, experiences and whatnot. So a story that I can share, or that I will share, that I haven't shared before. For me, all of the very, very worst memories of my childhood, like every single one of them, like the really bad ones, I always associated and linked directly to being caused by money. And I've told there's some key events that were especially miserable. And I've shared a couple of them before. I haven't shared this one yet. So since we're on the Are You Being Real podcast, I'll throw it out there. So I actually can't remember how old I was. I wasn't a little tiny kid, but I was probably in the 11 to 12-year-old range, something like that. And I am the oldest of 5 kids. And I have a father who's never been a part of my life or any of our lives. We all have the same mother and father. And so my mom raised 5 kids, by herself, financially and otherwise.
Wow.
And a lot of times when that is the case, the mom will go to court and the government will garnish the father's paychecks if necessary, right? If they're not paying child support or helping out at all financially. That's sort of the legal process that folks go through to get the other spouse to help out fairly. Well, that never happened, because my dad actually on purpose went out and never got a paycheck. He chose to be he's an immigrant cab driver. And back then it was all cash business. It wasn't like Uber now. It was like cash only back then, no credit cards or anything. So because he didn't have a paycheck, the government couldn't do that. My mom literally had no help. So without going into details about what that was like, and we had family help. I grew up in a great neighborhood on a street with friends that became like family, but raising 5 kids by yourself financially, pretty brutal. So my mom, being the oldest, my mom would take me. I look back now and I say, unfortunately, take me and expose me to her relationship with my dad. So oftentimes that meant going to chase him down for money. And again, like I have a couple other stories that are tough to think about. But this one, we go, and at the time my dad was living in the ghetto in Southeast San Diego, really, really bad neighborhood. And my mom decided, like, when things got really bad, we'd go chase his ass down together. And
Wow.
so we go into this really terrifying neighborhood for me, I was just scared to even just be in the neighborhood in the first place. And we find my dad and things start out okay, but they escalate really quickly. We're in the car, I'm in the back seat, and they get in a fight. It gets physical. My dad starts like stabbing my mom with just a key that he had his keys in his hand, whatever. I'm in the back seat and, still a little kid, but I kind of jump over and I'm reaching over and I'm yelling and he's yelling and I'm trying to, yank his arm back and whatnot. Things escalate from there. We get out of the car. Both of them kind of go running off. My mom's chasing after him and he turns around and he calls my mom a fat fucking bitch. And at like 11 years old, I hadn't been around my dad very much at all. I never have, but I hadn't been around him very much. But to hear my own father call my mother that was like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And also scared me even further because stuff like this situation was escalating fast, and I could tell my dad was now going to a place mentally where he was like no longer in a rational thinking mode. I don't know if you've ever experienced that with people, but like this is no longer them. This is like some irrational version of them that they're so angry that like they're not, anything could happen. They're not even themselves. So my dad runs around the corner. He gets in his truck because he just wants to get the hell away from my mom, my mom is like a fearless, she's not leaving without some cash in hand. And he gets in his truck and starts it up, and my mom decides to stand in front of the truck. And it's not like I've never seen my dad before, so I knew enough that he was like somewhere else mentally. And so I'm like standing there. My mom's in front of this truck. The truck is on, and my dad, like veins are coming out. His face is bright red, and and all I could think of is that my dad's about to kill my mom right in front of me. And I was too scared to get in front of the truck. So I was still standing to the side. And I'm like yelling at my mom now, not my dad, because he's in the truck and he's like gonzo. And I'm yelling at my mom, like, what are you doing? Let's get out of here. Please, I'm begging her to get out of the way of the truck because my dad's liable to do anything at this point. And long story short, I have no idea what he was thinking. Maybe the thought about like, hurting my mom with his truck ever even crossed his mind. I don't know that. I never asked him or anything like that. But in my mind, he was definitely this close away from doing that. And that was enough, right? So I remember for hours, literally, like we go home. I don't think we got any money. We go home. And I was like doing that like hyperventilating crying, that like where you stopped crying now, but you're trying to talk and you're like, that hyperventilating crying for hours afterwards. And I know for a fact that day like scarred me, forever. I mean, even to this day, I learned a few things that day more so than I ever had before. One, that money was a source of pain and bad. And like the worst thing ever. I learned that my mom is fearless as can be, and that she gave zero fucks. Like just a really, really brave person. And I also knew that I never, ever, ever wanted my own kids and family to ever experience anything like this ever. And I really think that, I had already been like that in my life from other experiences with money in my whole upbringing, because I was already, like I said, 11 at this point. But, from then on out, like I set up my life, I became, I was insanely responsible. I, got straight A's in school. I was determined. Everything I did was about never having to experience that ever again. And that hasn't changed even to this day.
Wow.
So, that's just one, and we all have our stories and experiences. Yeah. But when you're that young, these are the things that shape like the fear people have, as adults about money, just their general, how much they care about it or don't care about it. Is it a source of fear and anxiety? Is it a kind of like, it's not really, not really a big deal for me? All that stuff. And I'm not sure that any of it's good, bad, or indifferent, but I know for a fact that it shapes us and the decisions we make, and the fears and anxieties we have as adults. So I've never shared that story publicly before.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being so brave and courageous. I was thinking of, when you were telling the story and how you said at the end how you committed to never having your children experience the same thing that you experienced, and you dedicated your life to that. There's so many other choices that you could have made in that moment. You could have succumbed to that's your reality and to do the same thing. So I really admire the way that you responded to that. It shows a lot about your character and who you are. Question for you. I imagine even with that commitment to yourself, you were still living in similar circumstances. It wasn't just like after that experience when you went home, all of a sudden things were just great, I would imagine. Yeah. So I'm curious to know, when you did make that commitment to yourself, like, how was the road towards actually creating that financial abundance in your life?
Well, yeah, like you said, the challenges didn't stop. I to this day, my decision about which college I went to, money was like the number one determining factor of that decision. A lot of people, even close to me, don't know that, but I grew up my entire life wanting to go to University of Michigan. I was accepted in the University of Michigan and couldn't afford to go to University of Michigan, and knew that I'd be paying for, most of all of this myself. And so I went to the school that gave me a lot more grants and scholarships and things like that. So I paid a lot less, and then I did end up paying for most of it through student loans and whatnot. But I always told myself, man, a decision that big in life, that like sucks for money to have so much to do with that. It shouldn't have been about that. Yeah. I wish it wasn't about that. But then again, it was. And even all of these experiences, I like to think that I'm mature enough to know it. They did, and they have made me who I am, and I'm happy about who I am. So, that's all good. But you asked about my path to creating, and for me, it was just about responsibility, hard work. But I actually dedicated my life to learning about money too. Like, I know that there are a lot of people that do that, but that's also not that normal. And I dedicated my professional life after college to learning about money. Even when I was in school, it's like, I thought about it so much. I wrote my senior thesis. Another quick aside. Yeah, go for it. And hopefully I'm not rambling too much, but one huge reason why I actually became a financial advisor is because I had a best friend and roommate in college, and I played football as a quarterback. This guy was my wide receiver, and he and I were really close. And his father, no matter where we played in the country, we played football games all over the country. His father was at every single one of our games on the sideline taking photos. And that like touched me so much. Like, I was like, that's awesome, man. Like, this dad loves his son so much. My dad's never seen me play a single game of anything in my life. And this guy's dad like is flying around the country. He's not missing a game, and of course, given me, the first thing that comes to my mind is, how can he afford something like that? This guy must be loaded out of his mind. So because I was so close with my friend, this guy ends up becoming a mentor to me. He was a financial advisor. And this friend of mine's name is Lewis House. Yeah, that's who I thought you were going to say. Yeah. And so, literally from at all stages of my life, money has really, he was a financial advisor. I thought I would love to be there for my kids one day, whatever it is they're up to just be there. And I did my senior thesis paper on Lewis's dad's company that he was working for. Wow. So yeah, so then, I don't think, I have to say that in the beginning, the first like real job I took out of college, I took straight up because of money. I didn't care about anything else. Passion, mission. Literally nothing.
Okay.
It was an investment banking job. I didn't even know what investment banking was. Legitimately didn't know what that even meant. I had heard that they make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I took it and it was all about money for me. And, you know, that's definitely changed over the years in a major way. But money's like just been something that's shaped so much of my whole like experience, I guess, you know?
Where does worthiness play into the equation there?
That's a good question. I definitely think that there's always been some stuff going on in the background, you know, of my mind about that through a lot of like therapeutic type and self development work that I've done. I think that in a lot of ways I felt discarded by my dad, you know, like he didn't ever want to have anything to do with me or with us, which was like mind blowing to me, but seemingly true. And I think because of that, I actually like, I think so much of what's driven me to be, you know, just like the best on the sports team and the best in school and to make, you know, a lot of money and all that was really to prove that I am worth something, you know, because I such an important relationship in your life, in my life that didn't make me feel like I was worth anything to him. So I think that's how it's played out. And again, this shows up in my marriage too. It's all super interesting, but like when my ultra hardcore responsibility mode kicks in, you know, I got to be careful because I can, you know, that in a lot of times that makes me rigid about things that, you know, a lot of times isn't healthy and whatnot, but it's a part of who I am and still learning. But to answer your question, how does awareness fit in? I think that's a big part of it.
Wow. Chris, thank you so much for your openness and vulnerability on such a real topic that we can all relate to in our own individual ways. So I really appreciate you leading by example here with the openness.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Having worked with, you know, hundreds or thousands of people, I'm kind of curious to know maybe some of the themes that you've continued to see over and over again, what it's taught you about people's relationship with money or what you've deemed to be unhealthy relationships with money or unhealthy money mindsets versus more positive, healthy ones.
You know, some of the themes that I've seen, you know, recurring patterns. Number one, so many people, no matter where they are on like the spectrum of like how much money they have, do they own a house or are they renting? Do they have actually savings and investments, all that stuff? The vast majority of people feel like they're behind. So it's super interesting to see like one person come in and they're somewhere and they're like, I feel like I'm so behind, and they have a lot of anxiety about it and they feel shame about it. And then not too long after that, someone else comes in, has triple the amount of maybe net worth of that first person. And they sound exactly the same. I feel like I'm behind, and they have anxiety about it and they have shame about it. And then the next person comes in and is even on a higher net worth and they feel like they should be doing better. They wish they were doing better and they have shame about it. So that's been super eye-opening to me.
So interesting.
Yeah. And I'm constantly out there telling people, knock it off with this feeling shame about where you at, where you are. I'm like, take it from me. I work with people, you know, every day. This is what I do. And everyone feels like that. I mean, at least a lot of people do, and it's not right, and you shouldn't feel like that. So I think people could learn from this recurring pattern that you know, don't be so hard on yourself. Like, we're all experiencing the same stuff, even those of us, or, you know, people that are on different socioeconomic / net worth levels. You know what I'm saying? So what it reminds me of is that it brings it back to that the happiness and fulfillment is a spiritual practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd imagine there's probably a lot of people on both ends of this spectrum, some who avoid thinking about money or avoid looking at their bank account and they just don't even want to think about it, so they'll look the other way, versus other people who are just absolutely obsessed about it and maybe micromanage their bank account or are just obsessed with making more money.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious to hear, is there anything that you've seen or learned with people on one end of the spectrum or another?
Yeah, first of all, you're exactly right. It's a good question, but you're exactly right. Those are the ends of the spectrum where someone just totally, I see really bad situations when people are in just denial mode.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of unnecessary mistakes being made, a lot of decisions that are just kind of making it so they're digging their hole even deeper.
Yeah.
When you're in denial mode, that tends to be the cause. And it's just, and it gets harder and harder for you to get out of that. So I'm always encouraging people not to be in denial mode. And then the opposite end of constantly being obsessed by it. I mean, it's hard to have full fulfillment, not just money, fulfillment, but 360 fulfillment when you're only focused on one part of your life. So what I see in those situations are suffering relationships, absentee parents, if I'm being honest, particularly absentee fathers. I guess those are some of the symptoms of being on both ends of the spectrum. Like the denial is not good, and the extreme being obsessed with it leads to a lot of stuff as well. I think that part of the reason why I'm so passionate about what I do, very little of it has to actually do with the numbers, but
that's so fascinating.
Yeah, but it's true. Like for me, I say this, for me, it's about alleviating fear and anxiety. But like, if I do my job really well and like can pull that person back that's on the spectrum of like being obsessed with it all the time, or pull that other person that's on the other end of the spectrum, like back toward the middle somewhere, maybe their kids don't have to grow up as fast. Maybe their marriage stays together. Maybe, I mean, obviously they're likely to be more happier and more fulfilled, but like so many parts of their lives that are really important to us as humans, are improved. And that's major.
Does money equate to happiness from your perspective and what you've seen? No,
Absolutely not. And I've worked with people that have like no money and are in debt, and people that have millions and millions, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay.
And 100% hands down, take it from me, a person that has worked with all these people, money does not equal happiness. It used to be a thing that I would hear and like think maybe or probably was true, but now after my experience of years doing this, I'm positive that it's not true. There's a lot of people know about this study, but just in case, maybe I'm in my own little financial bubble, so don't want to make any assumptions.
I probably don't know it.
Right. There's a guy named Daniel Kahneman who did a study in 2010. Right. You've heard of Daniel Kahneman?
I've heard of Daniel Kahneman. I don't know the study though.
Did a study in 2010 with someone else, an economist, don't remember his name. And basically the findings of their study showed that as far as improving the day-to-day happiness of your life, that after an income of $75,000, have you heard this before?
No.
Okay, the results of it was a scientific study, 2010, that after $75,000 of income, any incremental increase above that didn't actually add anything to your everyday happiness. So I've gone and looked at, okay, that was 2010. Also, was that like the whole country? What about people who live in like New York and Southern California, cost of living, this and that? Adjusted for cost of living and adjusted for inflation today, that number would be about $100,000 for people living like in Southern California. So what that means is your basic needs are met. Like you're living somewhere, you're putting food on the table, like your basic needs are met. And again, through all the surveys they did of all these people, more than $100,000 adjusted for cost of living and whatnot, doesn't actually make you any happier, or didn't make these people any happier on a day-to-day basis. From a evaluating their life standpoint, and they could say, okay, out of all, if you're looking at a bar graph at the different pieces of your life and this one's net worth, the bigger that one was, they felt better about like the snapshot of their life. But as far as waking up every day and the experiences and relationships and things like that, money above $100,000 didn't do squat. And I truly believe that, that's true. Now, if we can keep that in mind, I think we can get back to, gratitude and get out of the desiring more money all the time. I also think that that's easier said than done.
Sure.
And I don't do that all the time. I'm totally victim to desiring more and, wanting more.
Me too.
It's an ongoing practice, not a one-time, fix.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear when you look at some of your clients that at least you perceive to be happier, maybe more content with whatever their financial situation is. I'm curious to kind of get a better understanding from you if you've maybe seen what they value as maybe it's what their formula is for success. Now, I'll open up and share here that for a lot of my life, I have attached my value and success to how much money I make. And I am definitely privileged. I was fortunate to grow up in a family that I would say is probably probably upper middle class. My dad and his two brothers owned a printing company in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and did well. And we went to sporting events and family vacations, and my family sent me to college. And I definitely have had some privileges that most other humans and most other people haven't had those privileges. And I have felt shame around that and have felt that in order to prove my value and my worth, it's tied to how much money I make. And also interesting, when working at Showtime, I'd have the money direct deposited in my bank account for 11 years. So I felt like it was a little disconnected to actually getting a paycheck in my hand that I would then deposit into the bank. But I really kind of come to this lesson as to where I'm at right now, where I don't view my success based on how much money I make. And it really, to me, is the impact I make on other people in my life and the quality of my relationships. So that's a big lesson that I've learned, is to put my happiness and my well-being and my relationships first, and trust that money will come as a result of me doing my best to just be the best version of myself and provide value for others, versus being too focused on the money, which I have found gets in the way of my motivation, or not only my motivations, but also my intentions with the way that I deal with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that your strategy is a great strategy, because the answer to the question of what is it that I see in people that are really happy, no matter kind of what wealth level they're at, as far as my clients, it's their relationships with their family and friends. And friends is a big one that people don't think is, think of, I think, initially as important as family, but I think it just might be just as damn important. But yeah, it's quality relationships, which means time, means time with those people. Those are the happiest, most fulfilled clients I have, that, no matter how much money they have. So, obviously there's a balance. The far end of the spectrum would be I spend all my time hanging out with my friends and deepening those relationships and not generating any income.
Right, of course.
Right.
You still gotta have a vehicle to earn an income.
Yeah, and like anything else, yeah, if you need to, and the other end is you can't just be working all the time and not have dedicate any of your time to your friends and your family. So, like anything else in life, it's a balance, but if you're going to have one or the other, though, if you're going to have one or the other, I think that from my life experience, this isn't just work, but just life experience in general. I mean, it's giving, and it's spending time with people you love, friends and family. It's not rocket science. Easier said than done. Simple, but not easy.
I had Michael Ellsberg on my podcast a couple of years ago. Are you familiar with him? He wrote this book, The Last Safe Investment, and it's really tied to the way that we spend our money. And what he kind of argued is don't just spend money, but if you're going to spend money, if you're going to go shopping for a hat or something, go with a friend. So you're not only spending the dollar on a hat or something, but you're also investing that time with the people that you love.
I love it. That's amazing.
I really enjoyed his perspective on that. I'm curious, like we live in like, a time where we learn money management stuff from our parents and based on society. And I'm curious to hear your take on like what you deem to be quality investments. And, should we be thinking long term? Should we splurge in the moment? I'm curious to hear your take on that.
That's actually a huge question.
I know it is.
And for the sake of, not getting into, it being not an entertaining conversation, I'll talk about a couple of things and maybe touch on some investments. Yeah. But okay, you mentioned don't just spend money, and you meant in the book you mentioned it was about spending money with somebody. Yeah, that's awesome. And I would also reiterate, don't just spend money. Think about it. Think we all need to be more intentional about all of the spending we're doing. And I'm not talking about budgeting, and budgeting's tedious, and in my opinion, and it's kind of like dieting. It doesn't really work. Some people can do it for short period amount of time, but it's not sustainable. So I'm not talking about that. But with technology these days, it's so insanely easy to just swipe, and because we can just swipe, we don't. You mentioned the direct deposit from Showtime, not having the experience of getting an asset in your hand and then placing that asset somewhere. So technology is amazing and good in so many reasons, for so many different reasons, but also we are robbed of that experience. We're also robbed of the experience of seeing, let's say you carried around cash, which is like old school way of budgeting, and you paid for things with cash. You would have the experience, even physiologically, of seeing an asset deplete as you spent it. Okay, what that causes a lot more intentional spending. You're gonna think about anxiety. It more. Well, yeah, maybe, but also maybe freedom. Okay. Because you have structure, which is, this is what I have, and I really believe that there can be freedom in that, because also this money is meant to spend. So like, let's spend it and let's feel really good about it. But it's also we're also going to get to a point where it's gone, and having that experience of seeing it decrease makes you think twice. I haven't been in a long time, but I hear at Disneyland or Disney World now they give these bracelets where you can just buy stuff. Right. This is what I've heard. You can just swipe and buy stuff. I don't know if parents give those to their kids and they can buy stuff too, but man, that's not, there's something scary about that, because it just becomes all too easy to forget how much work went into earning those dollars. One of my mentors, Manisha Thakur, I'm not sure if she came up with this. I wouldn't be surprised if she did, because she's brilliant, but I remember her saying, when you spend, if you think about how many, so you go to buy something. So let's say you're going to buy let's say a hat, and the hat it's like it's a high-end, designer hat. And I love hats. Like, okay, all right, cool. So let's say it's a $300 hat. Okay, so she says, don't just think about the $300, but how many, based on what you earn, how many hours did it take for you to earn $300? So now you're actually thinking about it in terms of, this is a whole day of work for me. Right. Okay. Now, would you still do it? Would you still buy it if it was this is 8 hours of your job, let's say, or whatever it was, tears. Blood, sweat, and tears in exchange for this hat, means something a little bit different than just this $300. Yep. Which means something way different than just swiping a credit card. Sure. You know what I mean? Sure. So as far as, what we should, you asked about, I think you said what we should, can I talk about any investments or what we should be thinking about? I mean, number one, I think intentional spending, because what's funny is people want to know, what's going to be my highest return on investment? But what they don't realize is that the return on investment doesn't matter if you're not saving. Okay. So that's like a question that doesn't even matter until you're actually saving and have something to invest. And also, when I do all these financial planning calculations, even just from a pure math standpoint, what's going to have a far greater impact than the return of your portfolio or the return of the investments on the success or failure of your financial plan is actually the level of saving/spending that you're doing. That's a way more of an impactful lever that you're pulling than earning 10% versus 7%, trying to find the best investment, which one's going to earn a couple, percentage points more. It is way less impact. That difference in ROI is way less impactful than just how much you're going to save over the course of your life and invest. And also another thing that I like to say is remember that saving is not saving. It's actually spending. It's just not spending on yourself now. It's spending on your future self. It's still spending. And so take care of your future self. Do yourself a favor.
Have you ever heard the manifestation technique of circulating money? Utilizing just from like a speaking standpoint, instead of saying, "Oh, I am spending, $300 on this hat. I'm circulating $300 to acquire this hat," which is like kind of like expecting that. All right, I'm spending this money, and I know it's more money is going to come back to me in some shape or form.
So I haven't heard about it in terms of actually thinking about or changing your language or changing your thought process. I definitely have, I'm familiar with the idea of that, you're circulating, you spend it, it goes out, someone else gets to sell one of their products and gets to feed their children and it comes back to you. And I like that idea. And I also think it's true. I do have, again, if we're being real, about being real, right? Yeah. I do have some problems sometimes when I hear people, especially people that I don't know if I'm gonna I'm not sure. I haven't thought about this too much, but if I'm gonna piss anybody off, but I was gonna say especially people that charge people, that people pay to change someone's financial picture, their financial habits by by mentally manifesting a different way than they were before. Okay. I'm a spiritual person. I do believe in the power of mind. I also think that I also think that it can be dangerous, right, to just think that you're going to think your way into or use your mind into a way of earning more money or building more wealth. I think there also again has to be a balance of a thought process, yes, but also actual tangible tools and structure that is put into place to help you along, not just one or the other.
Gotcha. What do you think about goal setting as it pertains to financial management and setting specific targets?
You're asking some tough questions.
I know.
So I like goal setting, and I also don't put too much weight into goal setting. Okay. Especially long-term goal setting. Okay. And I share this with clients all the time. We're going to make a plan. That plan's not going to work out the way we make it today. Life happens. And even if we sit here today, I give you this financial plan based on what you think you want, where you are right now. We can't even fathom what's actually going to happen. Even if we tried to think of all the different possible outcomes of things that are going to happen in your life, it's literally impossible. So yes, I think it's valuable to set goals and then to analyze where you are in relationship to those goals and how do you get from where you are to where you want to be. And then you very damn well be flexible and of the understanding that it ain't going to work exactly like that. All your goals and where you are is constantly evolving. So your financial plan is not just something I give you. Your financial plan is a living, breathing thing that's constantly evolving as your life evolves. So I do think that there's value in goal setting to provide perspective about where we are in relationship to where we think we want to be. I do think that's valuable. But if we put too much weight into those goals and we're too hard on ourselves, if we're not, on track and things like that, that is, I think in a lot of instances nonsense, because life's going to change anyways. Right.
Well said. Well, Chris, ready to get into this little rapid fire round. I want to ask you a couple more colorful questions so we can just continue to get to know you better. And since money is the theme of this episode, I wanted to ask you, what's the best thing that money can buy in your opinion?
Time.
Okay. Could you
elaborate?
That? Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's time. It's time. If the thing that makes us most fulfilled and happy is time with our friends and family. Yeah. I think money can buy you that. Money can money can provide experiences and make it so that you don't have to spend all of your time generating more income. You can actually spend it with those relationships that are going to make you happy and fulfilled in the first place.
And is there like a specific experience that money has given you, like this incredible opportunity, that you want to just give a shout out to the experience?
Yeah, sure. So Lexus and I, last year we went to Cuba, and it was a cool experience on many different levels, but like, you know, we were able to do that due to, you know, us both working hard and success in my business. And, we got to go. So this was like a lifetime trip for her. So she's part Cuban. She wanted her entire life to go to Cuba. And I was able to, you know, play a part in providing the opportunity to do that. And then another cool part of the trip was that, based on how it works down there, is we just went down there with a lump of cash. We saw that physical, and it was really cool. And we got really, like, especially for our relationship, because we got really, like, we were both really intentional about our spending, and it was very harmonious. We had great conversations and kind of, you know, negotiations about how do we want to spend this money, and then at the end we had some money left over. We're like, let's go blow the rest of it because we brought it down here to spend. And just a really cool experience that money provided for me, for my marriage, which was awesome.
Beautiful. I'm curious, like, in terms of like the paradigm of wealth, like in America today, where do you see us going as a society? It's another really tough question.
It's a really tough question. Well, I like to think that, you know, I'm pretty conservative financially, okay? And I'm like very liberal socially and in lots of ways. And but I do sometimes lose faith in how the government uses, you know, tax money. I'm a bleeding heart in helping people that are underprivileged and can't help themselves and things like that. But I really feel like that's going to be up to us. No matter what kind of happens politically, I beat the same drum as a lot of people we know. It's like up to me. It's up to me to give. It's up to me to be generous. It's up to me to be compassionate. So I don't know where we're headed as a society. Obviously, what it looks like is more disparity between rich and poor. You know, it's in our face every day around Los Angeles. And all I know, even though I can't say I don't know where we're going. I know that if I want it to be a place that's good, that I'm the one that's going to have to do something about it. And the more of us that feel that way and act that way, I think the better off we'll all be.
Beautiful. Individual, collective responsibility.
Yeah.
Question for you, and this is just, I'm curious about this. So having worked with so many clients, I'm sure your clients thank you and acknowledge you for certain impact that you've had on their lives. I'm curious, like, what type of acknowledgement have your clients given you? Like, what's the most fulfilling for you to hear?
Dude, this is the most fulfilling stuff about what I do. It's literally the best. I love that, like, you know, some people think of me as the finance guy, but like, it's all about the gushy stuff for me, and why I'm so, you know, passionate about what I do. But I'll give you just a recent one, like literally a couple weeks ago. Client got married, and I got a text message, and it was, thank you so much. None of this would have been possible without you. And I met her when she didn't even have a boyfriend, and started working with her when she didn't even have a boyfriend. And, you know, we planned for that in her life, and to get that kind of acknowledgement and thank you. And I didn't know her outside of being a client, but I got invited to the wedding and everything. And to me, that's like, oh man, made me feel so good.
Yeah. And it sounds like, in a way, it wasn't even just tied to money. It was tied to her own growth as a person.
Yeah. A lot.
And the role you played in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, hoping, yeah. It's probably lots of different things, you know, because in my client relationships, like we talk about, like it in a lot of ways, it's like financial therapy. Yeah. So we have like really great deep conversations, but then we also do the tangible financial planning, building blocks to prepare for life events, or to recover from life events. But that's one. Just when people tell me we had so much confusion before we met you, we feel so good now. We feel so much more clear about our financial lives, where we want to go. It's pretty shocking sometimes. We'll get I'll get like a married couple in, and it's crazy, man. Like, I'll ask them, what are your goals? And it turns out they haven't actually talked about that for sometimes years, because life happens and they have young kids and people are busy. And so even just to take the time and have that experience of looking at your spouse and going, oh my God, we haven't really thought about that in a long time. I don't know. And, to get those wheels spinning,
right.
I love that I get to be a part of being a catalyst for that kind of stuff.
That's amazing. With so many competing interests and things to keep track of in our lives, it's so valuable to be able to be asked those kind of questions, and to have those check-ins and to have someone there who cares about you.
I totally agree. And it doesn't obviously have to be a financial advisor. But sometimes for people, if it's not coming from anywhere else, and if it comes from me, like that's cool by me.
Yeah. What are your favorite investments? Like anything that you have, like that you especially like right now?
So I believe in the most boring investment philosophy that's ever been created.
You did say you're conservative.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'm conservative a lot of ways, but I don't believe in picking individual stocks. Mm-hmm. I don't believe in. I think a lot of things that people say are investments are not investments. They're speculations, which for me is the equivalent of gambling. So almost all the stuff you're going to see in the news as the latest and greatest, I would say is not investing at all. It's gambling. But you can make a 300%, 300x your return by investing in this. Yes, you can. You can also do that on the roulette table in Vegas. Very high levels of risk associated with both of those things. So there's not anything one like investment that I would say. Okay. Here's a piece of here's what I would tell people though, straight up. I really believe this. If there's anybody that does tell you that they know what you should be, this is the thing, this is the company, this is the investment, and they say it with all the conviction in the world, you should probably close up your wallet and you should probably run in the other direction, because nobody can predict the future. So risk and reward are always related. Yeah. You have to be very cognizant about what any investment that you're doing, where it is in relationship to the risk and reward spectrum. Yeah.
It's really interesting when I think about the way my investments, I'd say my most profitable investment was buying this house, which I bought like a little bit before I left Showtime, but and that kind of former life, corporate life, is when I bought this house, and it's done extremely well here in Venice Beach, where property value has continued to rise. I'd say the best investment in my time has been doing this podcast, which has not been lucrative financially, so it's been on the totally opposite side of the spectrum, but I still would consider it to be an investment. It just, the reward success is different. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And your time, this podcast is an investment. Anything you're doing with your time, you're always investing in something. Sure. Because there's opportunity cost of you. What is it that you could be doing if you weren't doing this? Well, lots of things. So this is totally an investment. Business owners take the more risk than anybody. That's the most risky investment out there, is putting all of your not only financial capital but your emotional and mental capital,
time, money,
everything you got, everything you have,
everything
you have into this one thing. Now, why do we do that, knowing that it takes up all of those resources? We do it because there's the potential of it providing us a lot of fulfillment, both purpose, emotionally, mentally, and financially, right? With business owners. So it's more about knowing what you're getting yourself into in any given investment. Business is an investment. And knowing, knowing what it will look like if it works out, and knowing what it will look like if it doesn't work out, and go into it knowing all those things, and then, make the decision to do it or not do it, but make the decision with all the confidence in the world, because you've considered all of the possible outcomes.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. a couple final questions to wrap it up. What can we do to support you?
Obviously, if anybody's in the need of financial advice and guidance in their I call it financial life planning, obviously use me as a resource. I'm happy to help. I've helped a lot of folks who don't necessarily become clients, but I also find that when I do that and enough of that sometimes people do become clients, and that gets to help my business grow even more, which is awesome. So keeping me in mind for that. And when I say I'm not huge on social media, like I'm not even big or medium sized on social media. I think I've made like 7 Instagram posts in my life. I would like to put more of my knowledge and experience out there to make a bigger impact, like you're doing. I think it would be valuable, and I have a goal to do that. So my Instagram handle is at Chris G_P. I'm gonna start putting more financial educational content out there, so I guess maybe liking that, and I don't know, to support me. That's all I got, but I would love for people to be more mindful of just financial planning as a real thing, and not being in denial mode, and also recognize that not only is it something that we don't learn anything about, but it's also such a taboo thing to talk about. I would love just for people to be more open and okay with just talking about money and having the conversation. The more we talk about it, I think the better off we'll all be. So.
Well, Chris, thank you for leading the way and for your vulnerability and the passion you have in supporting others. It seems in a way like the experience that you had as a kid, you want to ensure that no one else has to endure that, let alone you enduring that again. So I really, really appreciate the responsibility you've taken and your leadership.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So the show is Are You Being Real? So there's the external conversation that we have, and then there's the internal dialogue that is happening too. So I'm curious to know, what has been your internal dialogue, if any, throughout the last 45 minutes here during this conversation?
I just want, okay, so part of my internal dialogue, I'd say, does this information matter? Do people really care? Is it really going to have an impact? Am I really the one that should be advising or talking to people about this? All that stuff has gone through my mind in the last 45 minutes.
That's real.
That's straight up real. Yeah. And to finish off, I'd say even I, who knows so much about and has so much experience with other people and whatnot, I'm susceptible to all the same fears and anxieties, still today, even though I'm, in a lot of ways doing really well financially and whatnot. So it's a constant thing for me too. It's always something that I'm overcoming emotionally and spiritually. So just again, like a really big message that I want everyone to know is we're all in it together. I'm right there with you. And yeah, that's hopefully me being real.
Definitely. And I really appreciate that. And to me, I trust people who are actually willing to be human with me. So thank you for that. What final words of wisdom do you have for listeners of the show? Maybe it's something that you haven't said yet that you thought about while you were driving over. Any parting words here?
I think that there's a balance of wanting more and being content. So content can be kind of a negative word sometime, right? Like never be content, or maybe I'm being too content. But I also think it can be like the most beautiful thing ever. Like I'm content. So this is something that I think my words of wisdom are, try to be that perfect balance. And this is what I try to do, that perfect balance of content and not content all at the same time, if that makes sense. But if you're constantly always thinking to yourself, I don't want to be content. I should be somewhere else. I should be further down the road financially or otherwise. get back into your spiritual practice because that's a killer. And it happens to all of us, but do something about it is my word of wisdom.
The one and only Chris Girbes-Pierce. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, I loved it.